Greetings, travelers, and welcome back to Goldbound, the challenge where we've locked ourselves inside Elwynn Forest until we've earned enough gold to buy a WoW token. Because that token is our only key out. Once we buy it, we spin a wheel and randomly unlock a neighboring zone. And the grind continues. Our hero, Goldylocked. He can gather, he can craft, he can loot. And he can access the auction house, but only through Stormwind and only to sell. And last episode, we hit a wall. Market prices were crashing. Profits were drying up. We scraped the bottom of the barrel, trying to find anything that would sell. But today, Elwynn gives up a few secrets. Things so buried, even Wowhead barely knows they exist. So with that said, it's time to head back into the forest. And it's time to get farming. And while we're out here farming for hours on end, chasing ore, skinning boars, praying for drops that sometimes never come, you need something else to keep that fantasy brain entertained. And if you're anything like me, raised on MMOs like World of Warcraft and RuneScape, and book series like Aragon by Christopher Paolini, then you're going to enjoy the sponsor of today's video, Songs of Chaos. It's a fantasy book series centered around Holt Cook, a servant boy who does what no one else will. He saves a blind dragon and becomes a dragon rider. And this isn't a tale of a chosen hero. It's the journey of two who were cast aside, who never should have made it this far, but here they are. If you've got some Audible credits lying around, the first book, Ascendant, gives you over 18 hours of high-quality fantasy, all narrated by Peter Kenny, the same voice of the Witcher audiobooks. There are currently 3 books in the series, with the next one, Reckoning, coming out this September, so it's the perfect time to dive in while the new release is just over the horizon. The link below will take you straight to your local Audible store. Great to listen while grinding, gathering, or just driving around town. And if audiobooks aren't your thing, Songs of Chaos is also available in ebook, Kindle Unlimited, paperback, and hardcover. And Michael is a fellow traveler in both Azeroth and Gilinar, so I couldn't be happier to work with him on the Goldbound series. Check the link down below for your summer reads, and let's get back to the grind. I decided to kick off the week by testing something classic, the Fargo Deep Mine. Now, this is a quest zone, and nothing special at first glance. I was just going to scout for some linen cloth, kobold mining mallets, and maybe something sneaky worth farming. But only a few minutes into the preliminary tests, something dropped. It might be the lowest drop rate I've ever knowingly received. Now, don't get me wrong. I wish I could say it was a random world drop epic, a T-Boo's blazing longsword, or anything that would command some insane gold. But in Goldbound, where every item has to come from our own hands, with no trades, no boosts, quality of life items can be just as valuable in a different way. And while we were scouting through the mine, we looted the Journeyman's Backpack, a 14-slot bag. I was doing preliminary research and wasn't recording when it dropped, but the loot appraiser was on, and it's in the bag, and we got it from the kobold miners. Now, it's safe to say that in retail WoW, a 14-slot bag doesn't exactly turn heads. But here, for Goldylocked, in the zones we're locked to right now, and compared to our grape-picking 6-slot sack and those massive 8-slot collector bags, this thing is huge. And if you've ever played Classic WoW, you know. Looting a bag in a starting zone is a rush. And this is basically a runecloth bag drop in Elwynn. So according to Wowhead, the Journeyman's Backpack is a relatively rare drop from dungeon bosses and elite mobs. But the drop we got was from a kobold miner. And get this, across all of the logged kobold miner kills on Wowhead, there have only been 2 recorded drops out of 305,000 kills. That's a 0.00065% drop rate. Actually insane. More room for copper ore, more room for peace bloom, and more room for profit. With some extra bag space and a pipe dream of rare loot tables, I figured it was time to test out one of Elwynn's most classic and deadly mobs, the Murloc. Now there are 3 main spawn zones for these guys. You'll find them around the islands in Crystal Lake, east of Stone Cairn Lake, and down south near the Brackwell Pumpkin Patch. You'll find a mix of regular Murlocs, Murloc foragers, Murloc lurkers, and if you're lucky, a Murloc tide runner or 2. Their loot tables across all these variants are mostly the same, with a few different percentage points here and there. So really, any of the 3 farm spots will work, And better yet, these mobs do actually hyperspawn in all of the locations. That means with just a bit of movement, you never run out of anything to kill. Sounds perfect, right? Well, except it isn't. After just about 3 to 5 minutes of farming in a single location, I noticed something odd. You see, linen cloth stopped dropping. It's a pretty high drop rate, and I was partially just farming these Murlocs to get some more cloth to make some more shirts. We also stopped getting grays and greens. All we were getting from the drops was silence, a few Murloc fins, and clamshells. Now, it turns out this isn't just bad RNG. It's actually a known issue in the current patch of retail. A bug that apparently nukes loot tables in open world farms after only a few minutes of mob grinding. Kazaki wrote about this on the forums, and from our own testing, yeah, it doesn't look like it's fixed yet. This is a pretty big issue for open world crafting reagent farms. So, to try to counter it, I started rotating between all 3 spawn locations, hoping that changing the region would reset the drop rate. It kind of helped for a few kills, but not really. So I called it after 30 minutes, and here was the haul. 120 barnacled clams, 205 Murloc fins, only 35 linen cloth, a handful of copper ore and malachite, and 8 grey and white items. Most of which will just be vendor trash, but a few will go into the transmog bank for reposting later because they have a decent sell rate and average list price. Now the fun part, the clams. When opened, these guys have about a 5% drop rate for pearls. Nothing groundbreaking, and while they only go for 10 gold each, it's not bad to stockpile them on Goldylocked in case we need them for a future crafting recipe. All in all, turns out not to be a very lucrative method, decent for cooking reagents, some white gear, and a little sprinkle of crafting mats, but nothing to write home about. The fins and clam meat will probably sell for about 30 gold total, but honestly, I might just bank them for some cooking XP down the road. In short, Murloc farming is not the wave, at least not until Blizzard fixes the loot bug. We gave it a fair chance, but for now, we're gonna go ahead and move on. So, I decided to give blacksmithing a go. Up until now, we haven't really touched it, mostly because copper ore, copper bars, and copper bolts have been some of our best sellers. Why mess with what's working, right? But with the grind in full swing, and the auction house shelf starting to feel a little repetitive, I figured it was time to expand. Get a few new pieces in the rotation, and maybe turn some of that excess copper into something people might actually wear. So, first things first, the materials. I went out and gathered all that we'd need for the beginning of blacksmithing crafts. Obviously, the main ingredient is going to be copper ore, smelted into bars. Some of the swords and two-handers actually eat up over 10 bars each, which starts to add up pretty fast when you're batch crafting like this. I also noticed that we needed light leather for a few recipes. Presumably for the handles, I mean the game doesn't really explain it, but that's what it says, so that's what we gotta get. And by popular demand from episode 3, yep, we're going back to the boar farm. At least this time, we're here with a purpose, and not just grinding for its own sake. We're farming leather that might actually turn a profit. So after a few hours of farming, skinning, and smelting, we had everything we needed. Enough copper, enough leather, so let's get to crafting. And as we're crafting away, it feels like a good moment to talk about professions, and how they're going to work in the series. Right now, in Elwynn, things are pretty simple. We're working with level 1 materials, early recipes, and low skill caps. And that means it's easy to bounce between gathering and production professions without much friction or time sink. Take this blacksmithing run. We cap out at 75 skill in just a few minutes of crafting. A couple stacks of ore, some light leather, a vendor hammer, and that's it. We're done. But looking ahead, I can already see the problem brewing. Eventually, we're going to hit recipes in later zones that require 250 or even 300 blacksmithing, and that's where things will get tricky. Training that high with limited zone access is going to be a serious investment in both materials and time. One solution, of course, would be to open up a gold-bound warband, spin up some alts with specialized crafting roles, and honestly, it would probably be pretty fun. We could build a whole little economy that way, but that's not what this challenge is about. From day one, this has been Goldilocks' journey. One character, one zone at a time. No shortcuts and no sidekicks. So going forward, we'll probably have to treat production professions more like seasonal grinds. Focus on them in bulk when we've got the materials, the access, and the levels, and then stockpile what we make and sell it off slowly over time. I'm sure that will throw more than a few spanners in the works, and we're probably going to hit some walls and some crafting dead ends. But hey, that's Goldbound. Okay, so the current blacksmithing. In the end, we pretty much just crafted 2 or 3 of everything that we had access to. Kept it pretty simple. The weapons though, they seem to really stand out. Solid item values, decent sell rates, and even though they're low level, I wouldn't be surprised if a few of them actually got picked up by leveling alts. Is it likely? Probably not, but possible. Either way, we ended up with a good handful of extra items, and a ton of item value from just this little blacksmithing shuffle. Now, this won't be something we do every single day. Most of the green weapons already require a decently high blacksmithing level, but we'll keep an eye on what sells. And if something actually moves quickly, we'll restock it when it makes sense. For now, it's just another inventory on the auction house to sit and wait for a couple buyers. Anyways, if you've watched episode 1, it's time to revisit some classic farms with some marginal improvements. Now, the first farm I want to circle back to is the Frayed Knot. And yeah, with the spike in supply from the series, the prices have dropped. But interestingly, the sale rate is way up. It's no longer acting like a high-priced slow mover. Instead, it's trading more like a mid-priced, moderately fast mover. According to TSM, region-wide sales are clocking in at over 200 per day. Even at just 200 gold, that's still 40,000 gold in daily volume in the region. Now, I do have a hunch that some of that is people maybe trying to reset the market back up to 500 or 1,000 gold. But hey, a free market is a free market. And if we can sell 200, we'll sell 200. So, how do we get them? Well, back in episode 1, we rotated between all the humanoids in Elwynn to reset the pickpocket loot every 10 minutes while keeping up a high rate of pickpockets. Still probably the best knots per hour method, but we found a more chill and slightly more AFK friendly alternative. Down by the Brackwell Pumpkin Patch are a few unique quest mobs. There's Erlin Drudgemore, Serena Caledon, and of course, Morgan the Collector. And, you guessed it, all 3 can drop the Frayed Knot. And to make this nice and AFK, they're tied to a quest chain, which means they're on a forced respawn timer. About 15 to 30 seconds. So, you can pickpocket them, kill them, let them respawn, and do it all over again. All while watching your favorite YouTubers. It's not the fastest, but it's AFK friendly, steady, and a low effort padding for the Frayed Knot pile. And the second farm we've made some improvements on, well, it's time to return to the crazy cat lady. And again, if you remember from episode 1, this whole gold making method revolves around reselling Donna's cats on the auction house. It's simple, and it's charming, and only mildly deranged. But there's actually a neat little trick you can do after you've bought the cats in crates.
Have a good one.
The game treats new, and I guess you could call them used cats, differently. If you right-click the crate to learn the pet, and then open your pet journal, you can select the cat and choose to put it back in a cage. And then, if you check the bags, the cat is back, but this time, it's flagged as a different item. And the auction house and TSM sale data shows a separate listing for the caged version versus the crate version. And since these cats are basically Goldylock's only companions in Elwynn, I figured we should add one to the series. So meet Goldie Cat. From now on, whenever we're pickpocketing through the woods, we might have little orange tag-along. But back to the sales. When we check the auction house, both the caged cat and the crate cat are actually listed separately, and with different prices. And the weird part, the caged cats, aka the used cats, often sell for more. Now this is probably because not everyone knows the difference, but this trick lets us list both versions, doubling our market presence and doubling our chances to sell. Not bad for a couple silver, and a trip to our good friend Donna's. Now, it wouldn't be a Goldbound episode without a bit of dual gathering, but since we've already min-maxed the routes last episode, we're not here to test the gold per hour. This run is more about capitalizing on the clean gathers and soaking in the ambiance. And honestly, it's the perfect time for a little fireside chat. Let's talk about the series, and more importantly, what comes next. As you know, we are somewhat on the cusp of unlocking our next zone, and by the end of this episode, we'll know if we made it, or if there's still a little bit left in that threshold. But either way, it's time to think ahead. One of the biggest questions I've gotten lately is, what happens to Elwynn once the next zone is unlocked. And also specifically, what happens to all the transmog, materials, and loot we farmed up so far. Well, here's the plan. The objective of Goldylocked is to slowly unlock his way across Azeroth, zone by zone, token by token. And when we unlock a new zone, we do keep access to all of the previous ones. That means when we unlock our neighboring zone, Elwynn will stay available, but we'll primarily keep it as a logistical base and really not as an active place for farming. The idea is to move forward, to explore each new zone for unique, hidden, or forgotten ways to gold. If we ever fully exhaust a zone, completely squeeze it dry, we might just dip back into a previous one for a bit of backup income. But I think there's something to be said for the innovation that comes when you're really focusing on only one zone. There's no hard rules against it, but I want to keep it interesting. And as for the loot that we've collected in Elwynn, we're keeping it all. Every piece of transmog, every rare drop, every stack of Peace Bloom, it will stay in the inventory, the bank, and the auction house. I actually think that this is going to be one of the most interesting parts of the series. Watching how those early zone items sell over time, as the market evolves, and how Goldilocks' inventory turns into more long-term passive income. Plus, as we get stronger, more efficient, and unlock higher level zones, the pace of the challenge will naturally pick up. But let's be real. For how long Elwynn is taking, I don't think we'll be coming back here for cutting edge gold per hour anytime soon. And because of that, there's still a long road ahead for Goldylocked. And hey, let me know what you think, but Goldylocked the Explorer has a nice ring to it. And that's not just a title, it's an actual achievement in the game, only granted to the brave few who have fully uncovered and explored every corner of every zone in Azeroth. Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves just yet. For now, Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor will be more than enough to test us. So if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed, because there's still a lot of stories to tell. And drop a comment below, because for every WoW token Goldylocked unlocks, we're giving away one to a random subscriber and commenter. This journey is just getting started, and I'm glad you're here for it. So, let's get back into the grind. And speaking of building up an inventory, we were running one of our many frayed knot routes, and decided to take out a few dockhands along the way. And, we got another 14 slot bag. I'm honestly confused. I even checked Wowhead, and this bag isn't even listed on the drop table. Not after over 10,000 recorded kills. So, either something really strange is going on with the drop rates, scaling, and how old world zones work when you've out-leveled them, or Goldylocked is just the luckiest character in Azeroth. I mean, I'm not complaining. Right now, our auction house reposts take 6 to 8 trips, just to list about 120 items. That's how tight our bag space is. So, bigger bags, big happy. Still, I'm keeping my eye on those drop rates, because something isn't adding up. But with all this extra space, let's craft up something we might be able to sell for a little more profit. And by the way, all this gathering, it wasn't just for B-roll. This time around, we actually focused a bit more on herbs than usual. Now, back in episode 3, we ran a full dual gathering test, and honestly, we determined that herbs weren't even worth picking up, and the culprit was alabaster pigments. I'd gone through every recipe I could learn from the trade skill trainers in Elwynn, and nearly all of them just turned those pigments into Moonglow ink, and those into scrolls that sold for nothing. And while Moonglow ink can sometimes trade for double the price of alabaster, the market's a little unstable, so I wrote it off. But this past weekend, while I was cutting weight for a powerlifting meet, just passing the time in Elwynn, I started theory crafting, looking for new, overlooked, and novel ways to turn a profit. And I think we found one. And there's a reason I left this farm for the latter half of the video. I wanted to make sure only the dedicated Goldbound viewers made it this far, because this might be one of those little tricks that only works for a few days before the market catches on. So here's what I found. Low-level inscription in Elwynn doesn't just offer recipes from trainers. It actually has a discovery system built in. That's right, an experimentation mechanic that unlocks new recipes from experimenting with inks. It's got my attention. At first, I kind of assumed it would just lead to some more level scrolls, maybe +5 intellect, +3 stamina, the kind of stuff that nobody uses past level 10. But I was wrong. the vast majority of these discoveries are actually glyphs. And in retail WoW, glyphs are pretty much purely cosmetic, meaning they're usable and valuable to characters of any level. And that means they can at times command max level prices. One glyph in particular stands out, the Glyph of Stars. This glyph changes a druid's moonkin form into a sleek, translucent astral form. It's flashy and it's popular, and in most realms it actually sells pretty well. So here's the play. We'll start crafting Moonglow ink from alabaster pigment. And then, once we have a stack of Moonglow ink, we'll begin the discovery process. Each experiment costs ink, and every time you try, you can unlock a random glyph recipe and some random scrolls. I'm not too sure all the scrolls you can get from this. Most of them seem to be kind of junk, but there might be some rare ones in there too. So we'll make sure to check the value in all of them. But some glyph recipes, like the Glyph of Stars, have an average sale price of around 66 gold, with over 1,400 units sold daily across the region, and only costs 3 Moonglow ink per glyph. That's 6 alabaster pigments. So we still need to be careful of the margins, but any glyph that sells for more than 35 gold is pretty much solid profit. And with a bit of luck, this could be a great way to turn a low-level herb into some real gold. Just keep it quiet, alright? But really, the auction house is a PvP environment, so have at it. With our 2 weeks of farming since episode 3 behind us, it's about time. Time to crack open the old mailbox and see just how much gold we made this episode. And if you've been checking during the episode, or back in episode 3, you'll know we've been hovering around 125,000 gold. So let's ride on over to the classic Gold Shower mailbox, pop that latch, and tally it all up, along with a fresh /played reveal. But right on the top, we have a legitimate full stack of 20 frayed knots. Those sold for about 180 gold each. And the glyph farm, well, we just started doing it recently, but we've still landed over 90 sales, so just about 8,000 gold this week. Not bad at all. And of course, as we can see here, we're still slinging the usual classics. Copper bolts, shirts, scraps of gear. But something a bit different is one of our thuggish shields sold for 3k gold. I mean, honestly, someone got a bargain, but I'm still going to take that gold every day. And a few of our newly crafted blacksmithing weapons moved too. Not insanely massive ticket items, but some really solid margins on those. So that time investment definitely paid off. Alright, and the rest is kind of the usual suspects, so let's go ahead and open all and hear that sweet sound. Yep, that never gets old. Okay, 54,000 gold collected just in Elwynn these past 2 weeks, bringing us to a grand total of 179,800 gold. And if you remember, we're targeting the floating price of the WoW token, which right now is 275,000 gold. So, officially T-minus 100,000 gold to unlock the next zone. And as for the /played, well, 4 days, 12 hours total. So that averages out to about 1,660 gold per hour played. And keep in mind, that's with a small stockpile still sitting in the auction house. We've got some momentum now, no question. So check out episode 5 here, once it's live, to see if that's the one, the long-awaited escape from Elwynn. We are close, travelers, and may your blades never dull.